for November 2nd of 2020, and here it is, Purple Rain by Prince and the Revolution. There's a lot of history to this that we should probably talk about. In June of '84, the album came out as the soundtrack to a movie called Purple Rain, and it was just at the top of the charts and received really well by the public. Kurt Loder from Rolling Stone at this point was comparing Prince to Jimi Hendrix and saying that he was just the force to be reckoned with for that generation. And I remember it really vividly. I graduated from high school in June of '84, and this got a lot of airplay. At the time, actually, I wasn't that into it. At that time, I was still listening to a lot of progressive rock stuff like Pink Floyd and Genesis and Yes, etc., Jethro Tull, Moody Blues. So it wasn't quite my thing until September. And when I got to college, I don't think there was a single dance I went to that year that didn't have tracks from this album being played. It was incredibly popular on campus, and it got me really interested into it, and I started to respect the album a lot after that. So let's talk a little bit about the album and what happened with it. It, of course, made Prince and his band incredibly well recognized, but afterwards it would have a much larger impact, and that's really the reason I choose to play this one every single year as an album of the week. If you've ever seen one of those stickers on a label that says warning, explicit lyrics, this is the reason right here. So the story actually begins with a woman named Tipper Gore, who at the time was married to Albert Gore Jr., who was a senator from Tennessee. Now, a few years later in 1992, he would be elected vice president of the United States under Bill Clinton, and then he ran for president himself in the year 2000 against George W. Bush, and you can read all about it. A lot of discussion about that election. So, Tipper Gore had publicly referred to herself later in life as a deadhead, a follower of the Grateful Dead, and I really have trouble believing that she and Vice President Gore were really that much into the dead because of what happened with this album. I think she was trying to redeem herself a little bit, but one of their daughters, I believe it was a daughter, maybe one of their sons, they had several children, asked for a copy of the album, and Mom bought it, and they were playing it one day, and her mom, Tipper Gore, walked in and heard a track called Darling Nikki, and she apparently just blew her stack because it contains what I would refer to as some very provocative lyrics. Now go and listen to it and you decide for yourself. Now, she started to call up a lot of her more conservative congressional wife friends, which is interesting because Gore was definitely not a conservative when he served in the Senate or the White House. And they wanted Senate hearings about censorship. They wanted these pieces of music censored. And they formed a group called the PMRC, the Parents or Parental Music Resource Coalition. And there were these very detailed and broadcast Senate hearings, and I remember them vividly being on TV. There was coverage of them every night on the news. This was pre-internet days, so you got your news from the newspaper and from TV news. Now, musicians were coming out against censorship, and it led to a really interesting combination of people that I'd like you to go out and listen to all of their music. One of them was Frank Zappa, and Frank Zappa, I think, is best described as a very avant-garde musician. And he passed away almost 30 years ago. But Zappa, I had always liked. I heard him played a lot on the Dr. Demento show on KMET here in Los Angeles when I was a kid. but he lived in the valley. He grew up out in near like Palmdale and that, and he was living at that point in Sherman Oaks or something along those lines. So his children were on the little league teams that all of my friends played on. So I learned about his music and about him from that because his kids were just around. I don't think any of them were actually at Walter Reed or North Hollywood when I was there. I think they went to private schools mostly. Zappa was just plain weird when it comes to music. And his attitude was, you don't have to like it. It's just, it needs to be there in case somebody wants to listen to it. Now, the second person involved gets when it comes to, parents looking at music. He was on Sesame Street and the Muppet Shows for guest appearances. He got a lot of airplay with stuff, but he did release one song that got a little bit of attention by this group called Rocky Mountain High. And what it was really referring to was just the thrill of living up in Colorado in the Rocky Mountains and how beautiful and isolated it was and stuff like that. But more importantly, John Denver had started out as a folk musician. And a lot of the folk musicians in the 50s were blacklisted during the McCarthy hearings. I would encourage you to go and listen to Pete Seeger music, Pete Seeger and the Weavers also, to try to understand that a little bit better. Then the third person that gave a lot of testimony was a guy named Dee Snider, and he was the lead singer for Twisted Sister. And he was a bit of a transvestite cross-dresser style, heavy metal type guy. And there had been some controversy about a few of his songs that were completely misinterpreted, just not understood at all. And with the three of them testifying, you saw something very interesting. Snyder came in full makeup and wig and all of that. And John Denver kind of in his very laid-back country western outfits. But Zappa, realizing what Congress and the Senate were really like, went out and got himself a whole lot of these $1,000 Armani suits. And that was a lot of money in 1984. So he had, he shaved the beard and cut the hair, and he looked really presentable and really well-spoken and made his point eloquently and warned both Denver and Dee Snider about, be careful, these guys debate for a living. We're not used to that. You need to, write your speeches first. Don't just wing it. So it was really interesting to watch their testimony. So the way it ended up, there wouldn't be censorship, but there would be a warning label, explicit lyrics. Now, last week for Album of the Week, we used an album that did get one of those warning labels also. It was from 1980. They affixed the sticker later on, Back in Black by AC/DC. Now, the whole thing pretty much backfired because the second you put a warning label on albums, teenagers want to hear it. So they're going to go out and buy even more copies or do it behind their parents' back. Same thing happened with books. And I feel very strongly, I want to encourage you to go out and read books that have been labeled banned books in the past. My father first turned me on to it when I was, junior high or high school age with Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. And his personal favorite was the stuff by Jack Kerouac, like On the Road, the Beat Poets. He had been very interested in them. So check some of those out. Currently, one of the books that is most requested to be banned from public libraries, you're just going to laugh, it's the Harry Potter series because it deals with witchcraft. And, when somebody tells you not to read these books, please go out and read these books. When somebody tells you not to listen to the music, please go out and listen to the music. Make your decision about whether you like it or not, okay? If you go and you listen to some Zappa, you're probably going to hate it, okay? I kind of love it, but it's just probably not going to fit your styles. John Denver, you're going to think it's a little bit silly and sappy. It was really popular in the mid-1970s. Okay, Dee Snider, if you like metal music, hard rock, uh, you you might enjoy Twisted Sister. It still holds up relatively well today. I don't own any of it. The heavy metal stuff really isn't my thing. Again, I'm a lot more towards prog, like Pink Floyd. But Pink Floyd got on some of those lists, especially for the album The Wall. Okay, so Purple Rain, didn't love it when it first came out. Really grew on me over time. I think it's an amazing album. Okay, we lost Prince way too early. He continued to put out amazing music. Whether you liked it or not is a different issue. I always recognized the quality of his music, but I just really wasn't a dance music type of guy. And a lot of times Prince's stuff got classified as dance music. But I think one of the best tributes that I can tell you about with Prince was that the day after he passed away, David Gilmour from Pink Floyd was doing a show. And right in the middle of pretty much his signature Pink Floyd song, Comfortably Numb, the band stopped the guitar solo and switched to the guitar solo from Purple Rain. And if you search for that on YouTube, you can probably find it. And then they went back into Comfortably Numb. So if somebody like Gilmour respected Prince that much, then you gotta go, wow, this was, really worth listening to. Okay, so that's the album of the week for November 2nd. Please listen to it. It's an important piece of music in the grand scheme of things. Okay, this is Morgan, signing off.